Okay, here we go. Okay, so we record as always, and we'll put them on the Summer Voice page for people to review afterwards. I assume we'll probably go till 5:30 again, like we did the last time. But so if you need to dip out at any point, feel free to. The recording will be up. Please note any questions you've got. If you're, if you have to leave early, write them down so we can try to address them later. It's going to be mostly the offshoots team presenting today, and then a little bit of time at the end for thinking about our networks. I will, between the offshoot staff and me, will cover the minutes so that committee members can just focus. Reminder that you can do captions if you click on the three dots that say more at the bottom right, and enable those, turn those on. If you have any other technical questions, feel free to message Courtney during the session. I don't think we have any non-committee members here, but if we do, we'll do some public comment at the end. And just one note, I know I put this in an email, but for committee members, we're trying to reschedule the April meeting date. I need to touch base with the offshoots team about this because of the eclipse. We don't want to compete with a solar
we don't.
Celestial event, so let's skip that. So we're going to either do the 1st or the 22nd, and I will touch base with the offshoots team about the best date. But if any of the committee members have a preference, Michael, I got yours, thank you. Just shoot me an email and tell me which works best for you, and do so sooner rather than later. Also, we had this off week meeting a couple of weeks ago to talk about the offshoots team's first presentation, and to get a little just sort of internal conversation going. That was really great. We got a smallish group, but it was super helpful. I sent all of those notes to the offshoots team. Does anyone who was there, were any of you all there? Cynthia, you were there, right? Just want to sort of say kind of what we touched on. The minutes are there. You all should go back and look at them to see what this group talked about. I think it was a nice conversation that we had. So, but Cynthia, if you wanted to just note anything.
Sure. We talked a little bit about the general concept of having some like keystone species representing the categories of pollinators. Talked a lot about language choice in that regard, which was a pretty productive conversation, I thought. We also got into trying to figure out if there's ways that the various groups that the committee represents can start helping with collecting data or thinking about promotions, so that, we're making efficient use of time as we start heading, please, into spring. And those are the things that stick in my memory. If I've forgotten anything, I think Michael was there too. And Tori's on the call now.
Yeah. I see you unmuted, Tori, but I can't actually hear you. I wonder if you were trying to say something or not.
I don't have my notes in front of me, and it's just going to take me a second to just give me a moment.
Oh, no worries. The minutes are all there, so people can go back and look at it. And if there's any other questions, we can chat about them. No problem. Before we turn it over to offshoots, does anyone have any announcements, events, anything like that coming up that you just want this group to know about? Yeah, Lisa.
Well, as part of the city's Sustainability Week, there will be Earth Day events Saturday, April 20th at the Growing Center from 2 to 4. And Sunday, the 21st from 11 to 2 at Groundworks, and that's the rain date for the Growing Center one. And there's been some conversation about how this work might be teased at, represented, etc. At that. There's also a Spring Garden Day, which is going to be May 4th, which is a little more in the season of things. And then, yeah, those are the events coming up.
Yeah, Claire.
So spring is kicking in from a phenology standpoint. So we are actually returning to all our sites on a weekly basis, which means that with the leaf, we're going to also start surveying insect and report on Buggy. So, stay tuned. We're going to tell you what we see around. So that's it.
Okay. Anything else?
Allison, this is Christian from the Offshoots team. Would you allow me to
Okay.
share my video? I don't think I can turn it on for some reason.
Uh-oh. Oh, I did do something wrong. Sorry about that. Okay,
No
you should be able to
worries.
turn it on now. Thank you for mentioning that.
Of course.
Great, hello.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone should be able to now. Awesome. Hi, nice to see faces. Okay, cool. Offshoots team, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And Cynthia, that was a perfect lead in to what we're going to talk about to kick off today. So thank you for that summary of your last meeting there. So I'm going to share my screen. See if I can share the right one.
Shelby, do you want to introduce maybe who's here from our team today, since
Yeah, sure. That's a great
Nick
idea.
isn't here? And
That's a great idea. Are you seeing a blank screen, not my presentation?
I am seeing your presentation screen.
It's so funny. My sorry, my technical difficulties. My Zoom is saying it's sharing a different screen. I'm glad you're seeing the right one. Okay, so
Well, I think so, Shelby. It's looking like it's a half a screen, so I guess it's not. It doesn't look like a presentation screen, maybe.
okay, let me try again.
While you're doing that, can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah,
And
please do.
as a reminder for everyone to say, as we're talking, there's going to be a couple breaks for us to have discussion throughout this session. Also, take some notes if you have questions and comments come up. If you want to review, the video later, you can always do that too. And then as a reminder, next Monday, we're going to meet again and have this sort of off-cycle internal committee conversation as a way to sort of debrief from this meeting, do a little bit more outreach planning on our own. So just keep in mind as you're listening, jot down your notes, your questions, your thoughts. We'll have a conversation here today, and then we can also have one among ourselves next week. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
There you go, Shelby.
Woohoo. Okay. It's only taken me, how many years have we been doing Zoom? All right. So from Offshoots today, we've got myself, Shelby Chapman-Hale, Kate Kennan, and Christian Umana, and Elizabeth. And Nick is not here with us today. He couldn't make it, but he's here in spirit, and we've got some updates from him. And we also have Harry Harding, who is joining us today to talk about community outreach. I'm really excited, Harry. I feel like I always learn something every time I talk to you, so I'm really happy that you're joining us today.
You set the bar really high. I gotta
You'll meet it, I know. Okay, so really quickly, we're gonna do we want to focus today on community engagement. We want to chat really, really briefly about what we heard from you all last time, give you the little bit of update so you know what we're doing in the background, and then talk about community engagement. Then we'll have some time for discussion. So probably about the first half hour, we will do an overview of community engagement. Then we'll have time to talk with Harry, and then we'll try to save some time at the end to chat about the network conversation that you've been having with Allison. Okay, so task one, this is what we chatted about last week. We want to just, again, talk about what we heard from you. So as Cynthia summarized, there was some conversation about the flagship species approach and whether it was or not too specific, and whether it was or not sounding too specific, and being careful about the language that we choose to use, as well as making sure that we're representing the regional scale as well as Somerville specifically. So one thing that we want to put out there is, as we go through this, we are thinking about that strategy. We are thinking about ways to sort of maybe take everything that we've learned from that flagship approach data, and as we get into implementation, making sure that it's that umbrella strategy, right? So making sure that nobody's lost and nobody is getting focused on too much. So peeling back a little bit, I think, from that flagship. So stay tuned on that. We'll keep you updated. And then when we met last, we talked about the pollinator species that were observed in Somerville and the diversity of those species. Well, Nick went back to the drawing board and did some really, really great research and has really dug into it. And he found 249 additional potential pollinator species in Eastern Massachusetts that we could think about being potential target species and in association with the species that we're looking at in Somerville. So 571 regionally observed pollinator species that he's now logged. And we're looking very carefully at the observations to see the plant associations as well, and starting to pull together some really interesting information about the associations and the proportion of species found on which genus of plants. So some really good and really interesting information coming out of that that's going to inform the design. Including making sure I mention this here is as we rethink this, we want to make sure it's clear that it is an important part of the project, that we're making sure that we think about our at-risk pollinator species and our specialists and our generalists too. So here's just a little brief synopsis of some of the information that we've gathered, some of the at-risk bees present in Somerville, as well as some of the additional target species that we could think about. One of the interesting things that has come up as Nick has broadened the search is that a lot of the species at the regional level that we're finding are forest specialists. So we'll be thinking about that, and we're going to be in a few weeks, sort of a good segue into our expert interviews. Thank you to everybody that's participated so far. We've had some really great conversations about artificial lights at night and pesticides. And Allison, I think you've shared those links with everybody, so those are online. And then we've got a couple more really good conversations coming up. This Thursday, we're meeting with Dr. Susanna Lerman, who focuses on urban green space impact and working with communities. We've got Richard Primack, who will be talking about climate change and ecological mismatches with. Kelly Gill, who's going to focus on installation and maintenance. And then Cass Urban Mead, who's going to be someone that we can really chat with about that forest specialist finding that we had. That is her area of expertise. So that was the really quick task one. And I want to sort of buzz past that. And at the end, after we've gotten through everything, I'd be happy to chat with anybody that's got questions about that part of it. So on to task 2, the task at hand today. So first, I'm just going to really quickly review what we heard from you all. You had a really great discussion a while back on community engagement. So just a refresher from what that conversation was, and then lead you through our project approach. And Kate and Christian will walk you through the materials that we've started to put together. So when we reviewed the meeting, you had some really great overall questions sort of bubbled up. Who do we want to engage with? What do we want to get out of engagement? How do we want to engage? And how do we stay open to what we might hear? And I think, Harry, your part of this conversation is going to bring up the why, right? So that's sort of that 5th question. So what we heard from you all, who do we want to engage with? And you had a great conversation about who isn't in the room. Is it kids, 20-somethings, folks in their 30s? Should we engage with people at schools and universities? We should meet them where they are and use science to engage. What do we want to get out of the engagement? Some good questions that started to bubble up. This is harder at that point where you guys were talking about it, right? Because this whole plan was an idea. Now that we're getting into the meat of it, it's a little easier to answer this question. But where do you want implementations? Do you have a place to implement? Do you notice pollinators? How do we want to engage? Something to rally around. So really getting folks excited and interested in the project. Pilot projects. Tabling at events, and go to events where conversations happen. And then that 4th big topic idea that sort of bubbled up was, how do we stay open to what we might hear? That's a really great question and something I think we all want to keep coming back to throughout this process. And one way that we're thinking about it is that this community engagement portion of the project is really a 2-pronged approach. We've got this first phase that we're talking about today, that's data collection. That informs the analysis, it informs the plan, it helps us figure out and develop the plan. And so that's why we're starting that part of it early. There'll be a whole second part of it, thinking about plan rollout, where there can be more conversations with the community, there can be more engagement around, bringing more people in and sort of getting the idea out there. So after we reviewed everything that you guys had chatted about, we chatted ourselves too. And we had a lot of overlapping thoughts with what you guys put together. So I'm going to go through our thoughts in the same framework that your thoughts sort of bubbled up in, which is, first, who do we want to engage with? we want to make sure that we are meeting the breadth of folks in Somerville. So we want to meet with we want to not meet with necessarily, we want to engage with the informed. So the people on the committee, you guys are informed, and people in your networks might very well be pretty informed. We want to meet with the less informed, who maybe know about this problem or know about the plan, but aren't quite as sure. And we also want to catch the uninformed. We want to meet and hear from the folks that are not sure what a pollinator is, who aren't sure why this is something that is that they should be thinking about. So trying to meet everybody. Then we want to do strategies that reach people where they are, same as what you said, right? Meet people where they're at. And strategies that allow for ownership to evolve. So maybe we meet the students where they're at. Maybe we go to the high school, but maybe at the high school, it's the science club, and somebody presents to the science club the information, and they can take it to their peers, right? So the ownership of the outreach and the excitement about the project can spread. To what do we want to get out of engagement? We really, because we're using this to inform the plan as a part of our analysis, we want to make sure it's measurable data. We want it to be quantifiable and one-to-one, no matter where we're getting it from. And we want it to be rooted in values. We want to understand what Somerville values in order to best provide a plan that is what Somerville wants. So some gaps in the information that we're hoping to answer with this portion of it. Crowdsource the mapping of existing gardens. We'd like to crowdsource the mapping of garden opportunities. Understand residents' desired garden types. This is, do most residents have the desire to have a planter? Do some residents want to rip up their lawn and put in a new garden? Really understanding who's out there and what they're interested in. And then educate and start to generate excitement about the plan. That's going to be ongoing throughout this process. And understand how best to continue engaging residents so that this portion of our engagement can inform the future portions of the engagement. So how do we want to engage? So at this point, what we've put together is the idea of a meeting in a box that allows us to meet all of those goals, where any of you or anybody at the city could print the data collection sheets at any scale. It could be printed on a printer. Some of the boards could be printed bigger and put on foam core. So it makes it so that it can be brought to a variety of places and anyone could use it. And then again, that sort of one-to-one information collection, which is very important to us, and could go out to events, like you all said, tabling, breweries, venues, what have you, Earth Day events for sure. And then also there's an internet component. Kristen will show us at the end, where all of these like hard printed copies can also be viewed online in the same format, so that somebody who didn't have time could go online and do it there that way. So that is the big quick overview. Kate, you want to walk us through the boards?
Yeah, sure. So the idea with this is that these materials could be, as Shelby said, either printed and you could meet people at the supermarket, or bring it to an event that's already happening in Somerville, or someone could go to a school, or any of you could actually engage with folks of different ages and different groups. And so we wanted to create this consistent set of materials that we're creating data points that no matter where they come in from, as Shelby mentioned, they might be weighted equally. So these are both available in print form, but like Shelby said, you could also bring an iPad and someone could view it right on an iPad or a phone, okay? So the very first one is about just teaching people a little bit about why pollinators matter. And the idea is we would get even a little bit more graphic with this, and it could even link to a short video that Nick might put together that says these quick things about why pollination is important. Why do you care about this plan? You know, that a third of everything that you put in your mouth likely comes from it has to be derived from a pollinator of some sort, and that our pollinators are in decline, right? That we expect that we're losing 1 to 2% of pollinators every year, which means over the next 20 years, we would lose 30%. That's a statistic from Xerces. That 40% of our insect species could be threatened or extinct in the next few years. So just giving people a reason to act, and getting these kind of bullet points about what is pollination, what are the 6 main groups. And we could have this as this kind of written thing, but also that you could use the QR code in the right-hand side to be able to click and watch a short video about why it's important. So now everyone can get the same amount of information. The next slide is about what we really want to crowdsource is where have you seen a garden? And we're interested in where you might have seen a vegetable garden, an ornamental garden, or even a pollinator specific garden. So we can crowdsource these and get them onto a digital map that will then be, so this can be done in hard copy. You could literally hand them out as an 8x11 and someone could put dots on it. And we'll also have little red or green or yellow stickers that can go on it. Or it could be printed at a big map size that you bring to a big event that people could put pins in. Or you could have an iPad, or they could do it right on their iPhone if they click on the hashtag, and Christian will show us through how that looks online so you can see it. The next thing we'd love to see is where would you put in a pollinator garden? If you could pick anywhere, would you put one in at your home and then you put that on a certain color? Or is there a place around town you would like to see a pollinator garden? And then that gets into a different color. So this really helps us think about those missing links or opportunities that aren't so quickly picked up in GIS. And then the next two pieces of this is two other pieces of information we'd love to get from folks. The first one is, okay, these were the original kind of flagship species that we had put in there, but which we're not necessarily gonna arrange this now as a flagship species approach per se, as a way we're organizing the plan. However, we are interested in how people feel about these insects, right? Are you just as interested in the great black digger wasp as you are in the monarch butterfly as being a mascot? Say if we created a logo for the pollinator plan, which kind of insect would you want to engage with? And then also just a contact form for saying, yes, keep me in the loop, and any other just general feedback they want to give on the plan. And then lastly, where in your home would you be most interested in? So one of our objectives of this plan is to create a series of recipe cards that Somerville residents could use to create a shade garden, a sun garden. And we want to get more specific of, would you be interested in something that's in your front yard, a backyard, a foundation planting, in a tree median, as a lawn replacement, or as potted plants? Because it'll help us create these different kinds of gardens that are going to target all of these kind of flagship species and a kind of umbrella bring up the pollinator base. So these are what we're thinking about doing. And also on the bottom of that form, it also says beyond your own home, would you like to see more flower gardens? Because this is just one general question that, do you actually want to see more flower gardens? Maybe people don't because they're actually afraid of bees and insects. And maybe the feedback will get to some of that so that we can see just generally what some of the values are. So as Shelby mentioned, the idea is these are the gaps that we feel we need to have filled. We do think that this would be an initial engagement strategy that could go out utilizing the resource of everyone in this committee and your networks of how you get these things out, using this meeting in a box and these digital tools that Christian will go through, that you can utilize out with your different teams. And then we can do additional engagement around actually releasing the plan and the pilot projects and all sorts of fun stuff like that at a later date. But this is really about that initial data collection. So with that, Shelby, I think, do we have time for Christian to show the digital stuff, or we could save that if we...
Hey, we've got 2 minutes and we're still on our timeline.
Okay. Christian, can you do it super quickly and just show what it looks like if you were to use a device to get in here?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to share my screen here?
Do you want to, Christian, or do you want me to just...
Oh yeah, sure. So this is as Kate talked about, the essential equivalent to the paper handout that someone would get. And this is really about getting the information of getting the Somerville residents to pick a mascot that they think could be representative of the Pollinator Action Plan and its missions, and something that they can get behind, as well as being able to get information on how to stay connected as a resident with the Pollinator Action Plan, whether that's email and people getting to choose the level of engagement that that they have and when they are engaged. And similarly to what Kate said, this exercise of being able to express potential in your own home where you could see these developments taking place, whether it's in your front yard, lawn replacement, etc. If not, really being open about explaining why perhaps that isn't the best choice for the individual. And yeah, I think that covers this one. And
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to mention in the meet your neighbors part, where we were talking about this idea of a mascot, and again, we don't want to simplify this too much that we're just going to focus on one particular pollinator. That's not the case.
No.
What we also
Mhm.
thought this could be is an opportunity that there will be information about these 5 species, or maybe it'll be 6, in a more in-depth way for each of them, so that maybe again, Nick might do a short video, or at least we have all of the slides of each of those species showing when they pop up in Somerville, who they're associated with, and we thought it might be a great opportunity of information give back to the community as well.
They
So
give-
we're also using it as a way that you can just go to that level of selecting it, but you can go in and do the hashtag on the bottom right-hand corner and get to a short video presentation that would
Perfect.
show you
Yeah.
the main facts about each of those particular pollinators.
Yeah, and so the key theme there is like the levels of detail, right? So that one of the things I think you guys have talked about a lot is that there's people that are really interested, right? And there's a lot of people that might want more information. So this gives people the levels of, you can go to the depth that you're interested in getting to. And then really quickly on this online portion at the top, and then there's a reminder at the bottom that connects to an ArcGIS mapper so that people can come in, they can enter their information and pick a location, and then it'll pop up, and then we have a story map so that we, everybody can start to see where these all are. And what's great about this is that this data we can just export and then add into our GIS, and we will be able to use that information in real time as people adds it into there.
And the nice thing is that all the paper copies selected or collected could then be added in a digital way, and then all the information is aggregated together in one place that becomes a GIS later and filters into the site analysis maps that you guys already saw during our last meeting.
And this in itself can become a really great ground setting tool as you get later on in the process with conversations to really show how far that engagement has come and interest throughout Somerville, as well as having a representative map of the gardens that exist.
Yeah, and there's a couple other groups in the area doing similar mapping. We felt it was valuable to start fresh and sort of get it from the point of view that we have in terms of collecting data for this project.
Yeah. Tori, you see your hands up?
Can you add photos to the GIS map? Can you like download a photo of your garden?
That's a great question. We can look into that.
And I'd just be, interested in seeing an example of what it might look like. So
yeah.
Or
great question. Claire?
So there are groups in Somerville that gather this kind of data.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to gather the data as well? Because people are not going to do dual job, meaning to go into this database and enter their stuff and go in our database and enter that stuff. So are you going to gather the other data? Because you have, scientific data coming into the picture. We do things rigorously. So, and we're not going to necessarily, duplicate our effort because we can't. We really can't.
Absolutely. We will be looking at that information as well and bringing it in and making sure. Part of it is, hearing from the folks that aren't yet engaged in that process. But for sure, Claire, we'd be happy to. And I don't know, maybe we can meet offline but we'll be looking into it. Yes.
So Claire, of course, we have all the data that Nick is already about where all the observations are. So we have that. as a layer, right?
Yep,
And then
yep.
we also know about the other map that exists that is out there as the GIS storyboard, I believe, or the Google map, right, Shelby?
Map. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, because we're about to start our season, and we go deeper in terms of the criteria that we record, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
suddenly you're going to have in Somerville, you're going to have maybe 2,000, 3,000 data points, maybe, in a couple of months, but deeper. So, and we are not going to do something else.
Yes,
on
of
top.
course. That can be integrated through with where
Perfect.
we're doing in GIS. Yep.
Perfect.
Can I also maybe make a clarifying point or question here,
Yeah.
which is that I think, Claire, you're talking about insect observation analysis.
Yeah.
And I think there's like
Oh, yeah.
these folks are also talking about just locations of gardens
Yeah.
as like, and I think that those two things are going to create like a little sandwich
Yes,
of data on
exactly.
top of each other.
Yep, that's
That
exactly
can
right.
complement each other. Though to your point, like these folks are already aware of efforts that Tori and other community members have been doing to get information about gardens and where they are in the city. So I
Yes.
think they're
And I
starting
just wanted to
from
make
that.
sure that we were not, moving to a direction where there was yet another, way of surveying, because
Right.
then it becomes
Yeah.
hard, right, to gather everything. And
Right.
that we also follow phenology, by the way. We
Yeah.
tie phenology, we put phenology into the picture, right?
That's
which will help
that
you.
is a great point. So what this is, as Allison said, is just another database, another data point. We'll be looking at the other maps that exist as well, and then layering that with your information so that we can start to see and if there's connections, if there's gaps, if there's areas we should prioritize for gardens in the future.
Perfect.
Okay, in order to try to stay sort of on time here, I wonder if we should switch gears and chat with Harry. And then we can always, of course, I can stay on at the end too if anyone has questions, or Allison, we can do questions in any way too, right? We're always available. So Harry, I will turn it over to you if you would like to dive in.
Thank you, Shelby. Good afternoon again, everyone. My name is Harry Harding. First, let me just tell you, I am not an expert on pollination, all right? I am not an expert on environmental justice or horticulture or agriculture, maybe a little bit of pop culture, but that's about it. But what I'm not is one thing, but what I am is very passionate about community engagement, and more so because I'm very much a believer in the fact that any project, I don't care what it is, what the effort is, it's nothing about us without us. That's something that I have been involved in nonprofit and mission-driven work for more than two decades. And at the end of the day, I really believe that all the unheard voices need to be heard in any project, and those closest to the impact have to be closest to the ownership. It's about proximity at the end of the day, and I imagine I'm among a like-minded and well-aligned folks in this call. What I also wanted to just say, what I am is also very much not about being a talking head for the next 20 minutes. I really wanted to give an opportunity to have a bit more of some dialogue and some engagement in this space in real time, because I think that's another way in which we are staying true to the tenets of what community engagement is about. And I am a big believer in what I call the 3 I's of any presentation, and that's I want you to leave informed, I want to be interactive, and I want you to leave inspired. And I think if we are able to accomplish that even in a relatively short time today, then we are, and again, in line with exactly what we want to accomplish. And so in order to do that, again, I have 2 questions for you. I'm going to ask each of you 2 questions, and I'd love to get you to, in real time, answer those questions. For brevity and brief, obviously, we don't have a ton of time, but I'd love to just hear your voice and bring it to the space. And before I do that, I have one quick thought experiment. I hope you'll indulge me. Do I have share screen rights? I do, as a matter of fact. All right, quick question. How many of you are any sports fans in the space? Raise hand. I see some. Anybody into March Madness at all? All right, okay, listen, I love sports. Full transparency, I don't watch a lot of basketball anymore. I'm way too busy, but I still have a deep heart, soul felt love for basketball and March Madness. I only ask that because I want to do a thought experiment with you that is basketball related. So for those of you who have a penchant for basketball, it might be a little bit more enjoyable. For those of you who don't, it's still relevant, I promise. Okay, one very short video for a minute. If you've seen this before, I ask you not to give away the the punchline, but
Jared,
please.
it's not, all right,
Can you see my screen?
it's coming. Yep, we see your screen. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay. Answer. Anybody know? Anybody know? Oh, no, no. Anybody know? Oh, I didn't pause it quick enough. How many of you got 13? Be honest. Anybody get the right answer?
No.
Nope.
No? All right. Here's the
Only
real
10.
question though. 10? Who you got 10? Did anybody get close to 13?
I got 11.
Got 11? Okay. Here's the real question though. How many of you saw the moonwalking bear?
Oh, I didn't.
You didn't? All right. Ah, you see the moonwalking bear now? Ah. That's really at the end of the day what this is about. And I know you're asking yourself, Harry, what in the hell does this have to do with community engagement? Well, I'll get back to that in a moment as well. I just want you to hold that last comment about that it's easy to miss something that you're not looking for. This is I don't know if you have anybody's aware of this. This is an old commercial about from cycling in Europe actually. But that's neither here nor there. Really, what it is it's an awareness test. It's a selective attention test. I told you that I had two questions for you. The first question I want to ask you is a fundamental question that before we even get to the how, which I know is a major part of any community engagement, how are we going to engage communities that we want to get in the community that we want to get, particularly those who we can't get to or we want to get involved? How do we get to them? Before we even get to the how, we have to ask why. One of the most, I went to a training not too long ago and someone said this and it stuck with me. And they said a person that knows their why can solve almost any how. At the end of the day, this is about purpose. So what I'd love to do is ask you individually, why are we even engaging this community? Why is it important? So I'm going to start with Allison because you're in the top left. Allison, why are we engaging the community? Why is it important?
Well, I might be a little bit of a broken record on this, but I feel really strongly that, I have someone who loves ecology, I'm someone who loves nature, but that I think that in a city like Somerville, which has so many people in it, that it's really important for us to understand how people fit into that picture and to understand why doing something for wildlife or nature is important for people too, why that helps people. And I think that that is a question I don't fully have answered. And so I want to both be learning from other people and be learning from our consultants about this, and to help people and see that for themselves.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Lisa, I see you next. Why is this important? Why is community engagement even important?
Around
Oh, I'm
this,
sorry. Do we have two Lisas?
No, sorry, we have a Louisa, but I thought you said Louisa,
Oh,
sorry.
hi, Luisa. Well, I'll get to you. We'll get to you next. I promise.
I guess for me, it's about feeling that both individually and society wise, our relationships with nature are so disrupted, that I feel like opportunities to rebuild those connections and caring and is how we will get to the why for other people.
Repairing that connective tissue to nature is huge. Thank you for that, Lisa. Luisa, since you were so eager, I'm going right to you. I'm going right back to you. Why is it important? Why does it even matter? Oh, no worries. Cynthia, while we wait, we'll go to you, Cynthia.
Okay, thank you. I view this as an opportunity to work on learning how to care for each other, with each other expanded beyond humans to plants and animals. But the human part is super important here as well, because I feel like there's a lot of beauty and health associated with a good relationship with nature and an ecosystem that's in good shape. And I want to make sure that everyone that lives in this city has access to that.
Well said about that synergy, that mutual interconnectedness. I love that. Thank you, Cynthia. Luis, will come back to you.
Now, you're coming back to me
Now,
now.
come right now, right
Okay.
now. You're on the spot.
We have a biodiversity crisis happening in the world, and it can be, in order to solve it or help slow it down, we have to think on all levels, including in cities. And that's why I think we are putting this together, to put our heads together to do something to help create habitat and promote biodiversity in cities.
Excellent. Really appreciate it. I'm gonna keep us going. I see Claire. Claire, why is community engagement important? Why does this matter?
For me is two things. I think it's to make the whole bigger than the sum of its parts. We're all in it. And we are all part of nature. We are nature. So I think that we're going to only solve our problems if we are all in it, really. And the thing is, because together we can build really an ethics of reciprocity towards each other and towards nature, as being part of nature, as being nature ourselves.
I love it. Again, we keep hearing. Thank you, Claire. We keep hearing again this theme around synergy and the interconnectedness, the dependency on nature, the dependency on the human, the connection between the two. I love it. I'm gonna keep going. I see Elizabeth next. Elizabeth, why is community engagement important? Why does it matter?
Hello. Well, for me, I mean, I have lived in Cambridge, Somerville for a few years now, and it has been great to see like the resilience and the activities that come about from community engagement. So for me, it's about bringing people together for those sort of activities.
Appreciate that, Tori. We're gonna hear you from you. I'd love to hear from you next.
Hi. For me,
Hi.
this is an all hands on deck moment, and that, we truly are in a crisis, but it's perhaps not yet as well known as sort of the climate crisis that we are in. And for me, engaging community is not just to like scare people. Another thing that's like looming is that, and the reason I should say that I focus on this is it's because for me, I think it's one of the most hopeful things we can do, because there's an immediate impact if we plant a tree or plant a plant that hosts an insect that helps a pollinator, and that we can truly do these things on a very small level and individual contributions. And so that's to engage, to bring awareness and hope.
Yeah. And those what seemingly or maybe termed as small contributions can have massively large impact, right? Those ripples can, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna go to Jack next, and then I'm gonna come back to Shelby, and then Christian, and then Kate. Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I see it, we have a fixed budget to do an enormous goal. And so the more, involvement that we can have from other people, that increases the impact, that magnifies the impact that we can have, the much further that we can go with a limited amount of resources.
All right. So using limited amount of resources to have the maximum amount of voice and to maximize impact. Love it. Yes. Gonna come back to Shelby, and then Christian, and then Kate.
Thank you, Harry. These are so many great answers. I think for me, very personally, as somebody who studied environmental science and was scared of all the problems going on in the world, so I went into landscape architecture to try to find an avenue to see if I could make the needle shift a little bit. I think what Tori said about awareness and like finding a way to bring something very important to people that maybe wouldn't have known or didn't know that it was happening, but then to also give a little bit of knowledge and power in that even little actions, even if you're a renter and you have, what can you do, anybody, to try to make a little change. I think that's my why.
Harry, I also want to make sure that we don't leave out the folks that don't have their cameras on.
Oh, yeah,
Vanessa and Mike. Okay, I just want to
Thank
make
you,
sure.
Kate. I just
All right.
pulled up the participant list to make sure I got everyone. Thank you.
Good. Just because they've heard from us a bit at offshoots, and I'm super interested in these
I
other
appreciate
folks.
I appreciate that, especially from the person who's the inclusion expert. I'd be really bad if I was excluding people. Right? No one on camera. You don't get to speak. Thank you, Kate. So I have Vanessa. Vanessa, can you hear me? Hi, Vanessa.
Yeah. Hi. I feel like what everyone said sort of encompassed what I was thinking. Like, we can't solve this problem on our own in a silo, so community engagement's important to have everyone involved. All hands on deck really spoke to me, Tori.
Mhm.
And also, yeah, the fairness of making sure that everyone has access to these things that really make their lives better, if even if they don't recognize it, like
Mhm.
having trees and insects just makes the air cleaner, makes the world feel nicer. Which,
All right. There's a not only, whether we are aware that it impacts us, there's also a part of our responsibility in educating and being informative and being inclusive, even around the knowledge sharing around this for those who may not be not only not engaged but also may not be aware, right? So there's a premium asset and value to that. I'm going to I see Alejandra, and if I mispronounce or to say a name correctly, I want you and encourage you to admonish me on this call. So I see Alejandra. Can you hear us?
Yes, that was perfect, actually. I think sort of agreeing with a lot of what everyone has said, I think that the phrase, it's hard to care about something you're not familiar with kind of resonates with me in terms of community engagement for this project particularly, but for just really caring about the environment and wildlife in general. And I think it goes both ways. I think it goes both the way of it's hard to get people to care about protecting pollinators if they're not familiar with them, but there's also the other side of the phrase, which is really there's such few opportunities within a city as urbanized as Somerville for people, especially young people, to be exposed to nature, green spaces, and wildlife. And I think this is such a great, backyard example of wildlife and of protecting biodiversity. So I think that kind of hits at the other side of it's easier to care about something and to pursue something maybe in the future if you're familiar with it, if you're exposed to it at a young age, or even at a not a young age, at any point in your life. So I think that's kind of the phrase that is coming up for me.
Nicely said, and I do think it's always worth reiterating. Right now we are, even in this conversation, it's easiest for us to talk about why it matters for us. Some of what our responsibility is helping those who may not help those understand why it may be important to them, whether again they know or not know. We don't know what we don't know, right? So part of it is helping to bridge that gap. I have Breck, and then I'm going to go to Michael after that. I believe we might have gotten anyone, and if we did not, we'll make sure we do. I think it's okay. So I just want to make sure. Go to Breck next.
Yeah, I guess aside from what others have already said, as a city employee, I would just say, practically speaking, there's only so much that the city can do. There's only so much publicly owned space in which to do it. So, for this project to really have maximum impact, I think public engagement is obviously a key element.
Mm-hmm. Right, back to another point we heard earlier, right? It can't be done in a silo, right? It's all hands on deck. Same kind of theme. I do. We'll go to Michael, and then I see Courtney as well. So Michael, go ahead, Michael.
I can't believe you're coming to me, the least community outreach person of us all.
We'll change that by the end of this call, Michael.
Okay, I was writing down some quick notes here. First off, I think we need to teach people how to use the open space that we have. We need to get and preserve more open space if we can. And then we have to teach people how to not be afraid of wildlife, specifically insects. To love and get used to and want to get down and dirty and have them crawl on you and not think it's going to be like, ugh. And I'm probably the last person in the world to talk about teaching little kids about this because I have never done it and I don't even have any kids and I don't even have any of that stuff. But I understand and appreciate how important that is, because if you're going to be a true lover of the natural world, it starts when you're a little teeny kid. And have someone who will teach you and make you appreciate that. So I think outreach, while it's important and people should have something to take away and say, yeah, this is how I make a pollinator garden. You got to be teaching the kids.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is most important.
Really appreciate that. A lot unpacked there. Not just the importance of engaging youth, but also the destigmatizing around insects and demystifying it and getting rid of some of that fear. I think that is all very, very relevant, and also again part of the responsibility as we think about what community engagement looks like for this project. Fantastic. Courtney, I want to make sure we hear your voice, and then if there's anyone who we did not hear from, I want to make sure we didn't leave anyone out. So, Courtney, please.
Thank you. So I would say that community engagement is important to me because I feel like it is an opportunity to have a personal connection with someone else and let them know that they matter, and that you know, forming a real connection with a real problem, I think can go a long way. It's not just I think especially now living in a virtual environment mostly, you know, having opportunities to have in-person engagement, or like touching the dirt, learning about plants, like, you know, these are opportunities to have people feel welcome in their community, and feel like their community can contribute to something larger.
I could not have said it better. I think some of what you were touching on is this idea of belonging, right? We often hear about inclusion. The belonging doesn't always get the kind of highlight that it does and emphasis that it does. Someone said to me once that I love the way they phrased this. They said, you know, being included is being invited to the party. Belonging is playing music I recognize. And I think that's the piece of this. I think this is so important about this conversation, is though even though there's clearly some common themes around everything that we've heard, I think there's such value in just hearing each voice in this space tell everyone in this space why this matters. There's nothing. We may not get to a place in which we've solved every community engagement challenge in this particular project. But just this space for the last 30 minutes, taking time to just say, why does this even matter to me? And hearing our colleagues hear that, there's something about that that's not tangible and not being able to put into a metric, but has extraordinary value. And I want to make sure that we name that and hold that, because that is not a small thing at all. Did anyone not get a chance to speak? I just want to make sure that no one who wants to speak or didn't speak hasn't spoken yet. Okay. I also want to be just mindful of time. So again, another acknowledgement of thanking everyone in the space for bringing your voice to the space. There's a question that I think is, do we have anybody clinically minded in the forum? Anybody has a clinical background, or any therapists anywhere here? Okay. And maybe some of you have gone to therapy like me. It's okay. It's all right. No stigma attached to that either. There's a miracle question that you may be familiar with. It's part of solution-focused therapy, and it's a question that the therapist poses to a patient or a client that says, if you woke up tomorrow and I snapped my finger and everything was just roses, all your problems were gone and everything was, you know, exactly what you wanted it to be, how would you know? And I think related to this question around community engagement, when we think about what we're trying to accomplish, posing it this way: if we got to the end of this project, we're 2 years out, we're 3 years out, we're 5 years down the road, and we nailed every part of the community engagement process that we could. We engaged the communities we wanted to. This was a massive success, and we all could agree. We snap our finger and we're there. How would we know? What does that look like? What does that look like?
There would be a bubble that you could see from Earth of insects flying around Somerville.
I think
Or
some of our scared citizens, we're gonna have to really do some work on getting them on board for that one. But I like it. I like it.
or people could be really into it and trying to outdo each other with their gardens and
Yes.
really starting to care about what they've planted and who's coming to visit them in terms of pollinators.
Yes. There's an embrace. There's a a peace, there's a acceptance, appreciation. Yes. Other
Yeah,
thoughts?
I don't want to speak up too soon here, but maybe like a visible shift in the way that people are managing their land and their spaces, right? And providing, like, you can see that change, right? From lawn.
Less black and
habitat.
red mulch.
No red mulch. Zero red mulch is how we know that waves have been successful.
Please go ahead. Feel free to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Messy gardens, messy, you know, now the concept of messy is, I don't know, people think it's ugly, but actually I think it's beautiful, right? So to have supposedly dead plants, you know, in the middle of winter where, you know, insect can overwinter, you know, litter the leaf litter on the ground, you know, all these kind of things. What we think now is messy should become beautiful tomorrow for all of us.
What is messy becomes beautiful. That is, I'm a poet as well, among many other things, and that to me sounded very much like poetry. I love it, from messy to beautiful.
I want to jump off of that and say that I think to imagine a successful version of this engagement process would be that neighbors, community members who are not currently part of the gardening community would be talking to each other about this. That, like, it wouldn't be coming from us, it wouldn't be coming from the existing garden club members who are already so devoted and know so much, but it would be people talking to each other about plants, wildlife, all of that without the prompting from us, but just that it's like a cultural shift where there is some sort of widespread interest in, I think, like Louisa pointed out, outdoing each other's gardens, you know, like, what are you doing in your garden? What's going on over there? What's going on in mine? Without even any of us present.
Yes. That sounds like true ownership. That cultural shift, can't underestimate how important that is in getting there.
But I think we also need to teach people how to make gardens they can ignore. Because not everybody wants to like tend their garden every day or even every week during the summer. They just want to like throw it out there and, you know.
Yeah.
And I have a goldenrod patch in my backyard, which is very much like that. It comes up, it grows on its own. In the fall, it's beautiful, and I don't do anything to it. And that's the kind of thing we need to be also to allow people to understand they can do. Because not everybody's into competitive gardening.
The do less campaign, Michael. I've been calling it a do less campaign.
Yeah, I like
Do
that.
less for the pollinators.
less.
Yeah.
I love it. Lisa, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I'm also reminded, I'm trying to think like what would show us that people are now, to Michael's point, excited about all these different insect neighbors that they're seeing and knowing. And it just strikes me how there's a bird sightings section of the globe, like maybe we need a pollinator section or some way for people to like get excited about the awe and wonder of all these new non-human.
Yeah, similar to that, Lisa, I was thinking about how people love to post pictures of their food online. Like maybe we can have the pollinator food and the pollinator, and, you know, people sort of being inspired to show that they saw a bumblebee or anything like that.
Shifting trends on IG. Now that is another great miracle to see happen. I love it. Just also want to make sure we hear any voices that are not on camera. Just want to make sure if you do want to share, we want to make sure we hear from you. How would you know this miracle of community engagement success took place?
I'm going to chime in and say that, like, let's say you're a place where there are a lot of kids, and usually like if you'll hear like a bee, and it'll be like, oh,
don't fly it. Tell it don't.
Kill it. And then we will have had success when it's a bee. What kind? Like that's going to be what is it? Get out the camera, mom, dad, the camera. Anyway, that's going to be icing on the cake for me.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot, from a lot of synergy in the answer and the responses around this. Again, I call it, I think, I forget who's named it, but a cultural shift, a perception shift, a destigmatization, embracing. Again, this is another reason why it was so important, I think, to have this conversation and for us to hear it in real time, to see and actually be in the space of when was a successful campaign, to then now reverse engineer and think about how we get there. We know where we want to go. We can see it and feel it. That is the best way to inform, how we get there, particularly because we've already centered and established our why. So I really, I want to thank you. I want to be mindful of time and also just take it back to that initial test around the selective attention and why I started there is, as we move forward in this community engagement process, really being mindful that of selective attention and where it can be and where it can cause us to miss the moonwalking bears, right? And we want to recognize those moonwalking bears so we don't inadvertently marginalize, we don't inadvertently exclude, and we don't devalue our effort or take away from that miracle that we see by being too overly focused on the result and not thinking about the moonwalking bear, not thinking about the process that it's going to take and the relationships that need to be involved and cultivated to get us to that end goal. Okay, don't miss the moonwalking bears. All right. So appreciate you for the time. I really appreciate the voices, and I'm going to turn it back over to Shelby to lead us on the next part of the agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harry. That was really great. I guess, Allison, I think now maybe that's a good segue into chatting about outreach and networks. And one thing that we're really hoping for is the committee's help in spreading the word and getting the outreach. And we can think about the timeline. We'll sort of hammer out the timeline with Allison and get that information to you maybe when you guys meet next week, just so we can make sure we're all on the same page. But we don't want to miss Earth Day. So one thing we were thinking was that potentially we go through Earth Day so that we can make sure to get that big push, but that maybe there's an interim deadline in between where things could get filed to us, so we can have a halfway point and a final round. But we'll finalize that, figure that out, and coordinate with Allison. So Allison, do you want to jump in and talk networks?
Sure. So I've been trying to figure out how to go about this because I didn't get homework back from everyone, and maybe it's because I labeled it homework. So I did hear back from some people and I really appreciate it. And I can tell people are starting to think about like, okay, who do I have access to? And one of the things I'm noticing is that we have access to a lot of the same kinds of groups as you maybe could expect already. The city departments, the city committees, all of that, urban forestry committee, conservation commission. We also have access to state and organizational groups like Myra, DCR, the trustees. Partly that's from where you work. Partly that's from NOFA too. Partly that's from who you volunteer with. Obviously the Growing Center, there's a reason we have Lisa and Cynthia here with their great networks of gardeners and Claire with the network of insect observers too. So we've got this range of folks. And I think I would maybe like to just jump to the next question that I had for you all. And some of you touched on that in the maps that you made. And some of you, if you haven't made a map, I would say still do this. And for you, Harry, who maybe hasn't heard me talk about this already, I was trying to get people just to diagram out who they have access to. But maybe if everyone could just jot down on your computer, on a piece of paper, on your phone, if you don't have anything else, let's just take, I don't know, let's take a minute, 2 minutes. Think about your network and who you don't have access to. This is really like what I'm sort of curious about. If you've drawn out this network, who you have, I would really like to know, that's sort of your everyday group. These are the folks, maybe you already have them on a mailing list. Maybe these are people you see on a regular basis. You know how to reach them. And I want you to be able to, throw out information to them quickly, but I also want to know who within your network might be able to connect you to groups that you don't have access to. Who do you know that you could talk to that might then talk to somebody else that could talk to somebody else? So if you could take 1 minute, and I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock to jot down who you don't have access to, who you aren't talking to, who isn't on your mailing list, but who you think is in Somerville, who's here, who you aren't in conversation with. And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question right after that. But let's go with 60 seconds right now, whatever's off the top of your head, go for it. $15 seconds. Okay, time's up. Just a first initial pass. Who's not on your network map? Now I would say if we can do another 60 seconds, just quick list. Who do you think we could reach? Like, who do we want to reach? Think about these goals that we've tried to, we've brainstormed here today about destigmatization, building ownership, all of those things, all hands on deck. Who do we need to reach in order to accomplish that goal? So let's just do another minute. Go. Does anyone want to share just like initial impression? This is just a first pass. We can hone this. And this is a group effort too. So we're all trying to be a patchwork of networks. Was it easy to come up with who isn't in your network or who we should be reaching? Yeah, Claire.
So makes me think. There is some, how do you say that? It's hard to reach out to absolutely everybody. I actually don't even think it's possible, right? Because I'm thinking of some of the community, Brazilian community, Portuguese, and then the gardens, and then the scientific, and I'm like, this is crazy. I will never succeed at reaching absolutely everybody, or the French, by the way. Do we have some French in Somerville? I have no idea. So, but I think that what is important is us together, because each of us have different network, and there we can tap on one another. And maybe I don't need to care about absolutely everything, but I can work to make sure that everybody is reached out because Lisa has their network, or Renee or Tori, right? So it's just, so we're thinking, okay, there's 10 communities I'd like to reach out, but it's not doable. I don't even have the time for that, right? So I just wanted to share that, right? Make sense? It was difficult.
Sure, yeah. Anyone else? Cynthia, yeah.
Yeah, so the garden club is traditionally pretty West Somerville centric in where we hold our meetings, where we hold our events. I don't have scientific data to back this up, but I'm gonna say roughly speaking membership. And it also skews much older. I've never seen a teenager at a garden club meeting. And you can go all the way up to 40s with that gap that we have. So yeah, that was what came to mind to me. East Somerville, teens through 40s, non-English speaking folks as gaps. And then as for who we should reach, there's this whole thing of like people who rent, who don't always have control over what happens with their property, and yet, you know, they might be folks who could do like very cool container gardens or more if they can get, you know, good relationships with the property owners to do so. Businesses, again, the non-English speakers will go, like, I'm so out of touch with that particular set of populations. I couldn't even tell you what I mean by saying that, other than that's for me like an example of the moonwalking bear. And Harry, the first time I ever saw that video, I almost fell on the floor. I was so shocked. So thanks for sharing that one. It's a really good one. And then I was also thinking that there's folks who pay for landscapers and gardeners to maintain their properties, and I would love to get them involved to develop, I don't know what, like a professional core of folks who aren't just throwing down fertilizer and pesticides and making green meatballs out of bushes and stuff. So that's it.
Yeah, Louisa. You're muted. You want me to unmute you?
I'm sorry, I have so many screens that I can't get to the unmute. So I think the people that we're not reaching is similar to who we're not reaching when we're doing any of our work and trying to make parks, because we have meetings and the same demographic comes to all of the meetings because they care about this and they're kind of pushing this. So this includes people who don't have time to garden because they're working or struggling. Maybe they like to garden, but they have to work 2 jobs and they have children and et cetera, et cetera. People of color, people with disabilities, kids and teens, communities living in Somerville Housing Authority properties, and artists. Also people with a desire but no land, renters. And I would say, if we can be honest, like, that is a lot of people that are not gardeners, white, and resourced.
This, I think, brings me back a little bit, and please feel free to jump in, anyone else, with those initial questions too, but it brings me back a little bit to Claire's question of like, we have big lofty goals for what we would like to see down the road in the successful implementation, you know, dream vision. And how many people do we aim, like what threshold do we need to cross in order to get that? And part of it is that I think, you know, it might just be that we aren't trying to reach a specific threshold, but that we're just trying to build ownership in as many people as we can. And it's not a specific number or anything like that, but trying to come back to those equity goals of equity to information, equity to equity to the access to garden, all of those things in whatever fashion that might be. But yeah, Lisa, I see you unmuted there.
Well, I was just struck, and Michael might be able to relate to this, when some of us were working on starting the early recycling days with the city and the first collection days, and came and went, and then we met with the city and they said, okay, you got 1% of the people. What are you going to do to get the rest? And so you start somewhere. And then kind of to Claire's question, it's not just our networks, but the networks of the people that we do connect with. And that it's a little bit, I keep in mind like the sort of the habitat range of the different insects. You know, to get out of West Somerville, you've got to build that connectivity to get all the way to East Somerville. So almost thinking about who are the stewards, ambassadors for that habitat expansion, because that could be anyone. We want it to be everyone, but like to build the kind of like the our vision for an infrastructure, social and insect infrastructure, to scaffold, building relationships on. Does that make sense?
You know, I just want to inject one question to ask ourselves. So it's one thing to be tapping into networks that we already have. Of course, that is a strategy that makes sense, logical, necessary. The other question is, what networks don't we have, and what relationships do we need to build? And particularly when you're talking about, you know, the marginalized, those are uninformed, you know, whether it's people of color, you know, disabilities, many of the you know, the populations that Louisa was naming, and we know that there's many others. You know, it goes back to that question that we even asked at the beginning of this, which is why. It's such a powerful question. Well, really, why? Why are these groups not engaged? That's really at the center of this, because if we are able to better understand that, why are people going to meetings? What's the real root issue? Not, you know, more than just not being informed. What's really the root cause of the why of lack of engagement? And I don't have the answer to that, and maybe there's some of us on the call who have more sensibility around that. But I think there has to be a focus on that, because at the end of the day, even to Michael's point around, you know, having to teach and the responsibility to teach, and where that as a goal as well, it all comes down to relationship, right? I will learn a lot easier from somebody who I have a relationship with, and you're going to be able to teach me a lot more, and I'm going to be able to be educated a lot faster if there's a relationship. And so part of the question is tapping into not just the networks that we already exist, but where are the gaps, and how do we reinforce, how do we create those bridges? I think more emphasis on that, we will get to more really useful ways in which to engage. And I think your point too, Allison, around it doesn't have to be a target number. Target numbers are great, and we can have those for metrics if we need them. But I think what ultimately will be successful is if we leave this project with more relationships before than we had, whether it's 1 or 20,000. But the idea being that we were engaging, we know that those who are already engaged will be. For those who are not, how do we tap into that? And if we leave here on the other end of this effort with more engaged than we had before, that's a win, regardless.
A couple things I wrote down is like the dog owner community. I feel like many people in Somerville have dogs, and there also might be like certain plants that dog owners like maybe there's hesitation around planting because dogs might get poisoned if they eat a plant. So, but it's such a place of gathering at our different dog parks, or any park actually. But that's I don't know, there might be dog owners who would be like, yeah, I really want to know what I can grow. And then I wrote down adult sports leagues, the youth sports leagues. I'm not involved in those directly. Commuters, bikers. And then I thought about business owners and also like the churches and temples. And specifically, I was thinking about the sisters who are, is it Little Sisters of the Poor? They own that huge plot of land, and I've actually approached them one time about doing some container gardening, and they were so thrilled to do it. And then I did not follow through on it. So like, I think there's just, yeah. And the VNA as well. So, which is the Visiting Nurses Association. It's a retirement community.
It's the same owner, same.
Okay.
I think one last thing that I'd like to add, I mean, I think I listed probably a lot of the same groups and community members that people have spoken to, but I think landlords or sort of property management agencies or companies would be great. I think Somerville is unique in that it has such a low percentage of people who actually live in the homes that they own, and such a high percentage of renting, that yes, we can ask renters to do things, but getting at actual landlords and landowners, and whether that be, you know, large property companies or whether that be individual landlords and landowners, I think is really getting a little bit more to the source of people who can actually have some influence over gardens, backyards, etc.
Anyone else who hasn't shared want to share a thought? Or to Harry's point about building relationships and the thought about like, where can you imagine yourself, like in your own network of people, extending your network by building relationships with others? And Claire, I totally hear you. You don't have the time to build relationships with everyone. So as a group, like, are there one or two sort of members of the community that you're like, oh, I could actually imagine myself spending some time building a relationship with this person, this group, this church, like Tori mentioned, you know, that might extend my influence beyond that. Yeah, Cynthia.
I don't want to alarm Lisa because I promise I have coverage enough to do all the things. But one of my neighbors is active with the Greek Orthodox Church on Central Street, and they said, we want to do a plant swap around Earth Day. We'd like to invite the garden club. So that's going to be low stakes for us. They have all the infrastructure. It's literally just a swap. But I sure would love to bring some of the pollinator info sheets there, and talk to a bunch of folks who I don't know. But they also have like a big property. And I've spoken to, I'm blanking on his name. He's a former council guy, Mark. You know who I mean.
Niedergang.
Niedergang?
Yes, thank you. So he, without having complete authority to sign up the temple for this, but he has said to the garden club, it would be cool to build on what one of our members did, which was to clean up all of the junk around the temple and uncover a lot of land and to do some native plantings here. So yeah, there's stuff to do. I ran into a stranger at Tags. We were both getting paint samples, and it turns out she's a member of the the Rotary Club. And we talked about, you know, doing a presentation for her. So yeah, it is very possible. And I say this as a dedicated introvert, to work on these relationships and just see where it goes.
That's really great, Cynthia. From one dedicated introvert to another there. I think also another thing that we mentioned early on, and I think is something to keep thinking about, is handing off ownership, right? Like, is it that you can present to the Rotary Club and then they present to the other members, and then, you know, hopefully this can sort of transition hands over time.
I think there's a number of like layers to this, right? I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember there was a commercial and she told two friends and they told two friends and so on and so on and so on, and the people would like multiply on screen. But part of that is this, right? Like we all have to reach out to our networks and tell them where they can get involved, how they can do this. But I also think we have to have something on site that you walk by a garden and you're like, oh, the city has a pollinator action plan, like there's a whatever, and you want that in your garden too. So like on site within networks, I'm trying to think of other, like, oh, for example, a lot of people are watching to see what this pollinator action plan is because they live in nearby municipalities. Like other planners have said to me, we're waiting for this because they're going to use our work. So like regionally, I think there's professional networks as well. There's social networks, there's cultural networks. I think we have to find ways to like tap into all of these and make it easy for those people to feel included and do something. And for the most part, it's building a garden, right? It's creating a garden, but are there other things that people can do if they can't, they don't have land or a porch or.
Claire, go ahead.
So just on a building relationship, so as far as aware, we do a lot of biodiversity and climate walks, as well as orientation to monitoring or to observing plant and wildlife. We do that as well as a growing center, right, Lisa? And what is important for us is really to empower people, somehow to show them just the beauty right there, right? To look at, to start to look in the details, to look at that plant even in the winter. You would be surprised to see. So we more and more, we have a more varied community coming to us, or people, representative. And the key for us is to make every one of them a leader in a sense, right? To empower them, to give them the tools so that they can share those tools or share their marvel, whatever it is, to their family, to their community. And we invite them, of course, to bring their community with them or their family so that we can learn together. Because again, the key for us is really to understand and to make ourselves understand, that we are part of it all, the whole thing. So sharing those tools, sharing that knowledge, sharing those, marvelous moments together, just in the dead of winter. This is how I build relationship, and some seems to work. So it's positive. It really brightens my day. It brightens my dark winter days. Right? So I just wanted to share that, right? So empower people to really to go at the level where the people are, and to get them, to some direction that we both decide to look at, right? So that's what I wanted to share.
I love these ideas of like creating. And I think I'm curious, and I want the offshoots team to think about this, like, what are the materials that we give to people that they then share with others? Is it access to these online databases? Is it online videos that you're like, I watch these, are really cute, Nick's very charming, you should watch them too. Or is, is there stuff that we actually materially have available that people can say, I engage with this and I enjoyed it. Please, you also should engage with this.
And it has to be quick too, right, Allison, right? That's a hard part, is people don't have a lot of time. And that's one of the things why we've been brainstorming in our group about. Nick had this great idea about, creating pollinator stickers that you want to stick on your water bottle, or eventually when we get into the spreading the ideas of the plan, these ideas of these recipe cards that just show up as a postcard that you can send to someone else. So these other ways that people can get to the information really quickly. And I think like in this initial phase, it's just a really good thing to keep in mind. We have these sort of data points that we want to get out, but I just took what Michael had to say about this fear-based thing, about, the insects, and needing to teach people that there's like not a reason or there are many reasons not to be fearful with, you know, docile and solitary pollinators and other things. And just making sure that people are able to get that information quite quickly and in a way that's accurate, but in a way that's engaging. So that's why I think that this idea about having the physical piece of paper, but then being able to either watch a short video or even go more in depth if you want to, these different levels for this first initial outreach will be so important. And if you guys have other ideas, because we have lots of brainstorm ideas about how do we get the engagement after we get this initial data collection and it written, and then how do we do all of those other kind of pieces afterwards to get the word out once we've got it all in there. There's gonna be multiple levels of the engagement.
Before you two say something, I just want to open it up to anyone who hasn't said anything just yet. We're at 5:34 and I know we should be wrapping up soon. So if anyone hasn't spoken up and wants to speak up, then we'll go back to Claire and Lisa. You can always put it in the chat if you want. Claire, go ahead.
I'm just responding to the quick information is one thing. However, I think that when we build into relationship, spending the time and to make sure that people can go back to you, because this is one of the things that we observe. You know, a relationship is not just one moment, 1 second, 5 minutes, that's it. So we pay attention to provide this quality time, this community time where they know they can come back with other questions or to marvel even further, right? So I think that relationship means time, spending time together, right? And to provide this opportunity to our community that they will know that you are there for them, right? And we are all there for each other. So I just wanted to share that. The Growing Center is a wonderful place for that, where regularly we go and people come back and we have this, you know, fruitful interactions and we learn together.
Lisa, go ahead.
I'll never forget a lesson that I learned from some women who came up from the Highlander Center years ago when I was trying to figure out how to do Growing Center stuff. And they said, you people up here in the North, you don't know how to celebrate. When you do something, you got to celebrate it and find an opportunity for people to come together. And so I'm just saying, it's not too early to start to plan for the celebration of the launch or some way to engage, have people see that they've been heard, that their voice and what they said is part of what's happening. So start planning now.
Allison, when is Art Beat?
July.
I can tell you the date.
Oh, I thought it
All
was
these
closer.
things from planning around them. It is going to be
Because I think
July.
that might be pollinator themed.
It's going to be
theme is
wild
wild.
themes.
wild.
Yeah.
I think it's the 13th, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right, Lisa.
We'll make it work for us.
Yeah.
It's pretty close.
Earth Day is coming up. That's something that we can celebrate. I think everybody needs to get some pollinator wings because I can't wait to see Michael Fager in some.
We made them years
Never
ago.
gonna-
Make more.
I think he's vigorously agreeing. That's what I'm
He
hearing.
doesn't even need to unmute.
Last week I was working the polls in Ward 5. And this woman came in, dogs are not allowed in the polling place, but no one has the courage to tell people not to bring their dogs in. This woman came in with a little dog. It was raining that day and it had a bumblebee raincoat on. I was like, are you kidding me?
So you let him in, right?
Oh, I wasn't in charge of the door, so it was let in, yes.
I am gonna wrap us up here because we're over time. Claire, I see that your hand's up, but maybe that's from the last comment. Okay, perfect.
I had just a quick thought because I was
Oh, yeah.
thinking, like I'd like to connect with Mystic Learning and then the nursing home. And it made me think when we're producing materials, we're probably, to bring a whole bunch of materials, let's say to go to the VNA, it has to be like big letters, and digestible, and the same perhaps with young people, getting into the sort of like text and and yeah, the layout will need to be thought on. So that's my suggestion.
Lisa, we have some money for printing. We can. So I just want to thank you all so much. This was great. I really appreciate both our offshoots team for guiding this discussion. You included Harry, and for the group here for engaging. I really appreciate it. If you have comments you didn't say, write them down, send them to me, or we'll convene on next Monday and we'll have sort of a subsequent conversation where we'll get a little more action oriented about how us as a group, what our network is, how we're going to get the word out, what some of our sort of action items are for the next little bit. And I'm trying to compile a list of events and things coming up. I really appreciate this point that it's never too soon to start planning our celebration. I think that's great. It does take time and work, so let's get them on the calendar so we know what we're working toward. So if you know of something coming up, just shoot me an email, let me know, and we'll try to get this list in development. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate everyone staying a little bit late.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Allison,
care.
can you stay on for a second, please?
Yeah, sure. Let me stop the recording.